In this week's video I'm sharing my plans for 2020. I'm painting this glittery wintry scene and jotting ideas in my journal. I'll take you through this step by step. I'm really hoping to inspire you. Let's get your creativity going for 2020. I'm starting with the left hand side here and I'm using my watercolour paints today. I'm going to play with these beautiful purples and the greens when I paint the trees. And if you have a passion for paper and for making your own junk journal plans, then hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell because I have lots more ideas for 2020. I'm gathering my supplies, so just a few different sizes of brush here, and I also of course have a nice clean pot of water. I'm using some glitter today. I love sparkly things, and who doesn't love a little bit of glitter on a picture? So I thought I'd introduce that along with some other techniques today, and I'll take you through this step by step so that you can paint a scene for yourself if you want to, starting with a small piece of watercolour paper. And the first thing I'm going to do is really wet the paper. I'm going to paint the sky, so I'm defining a space with water, and I'm going to help the pigment really create a moody sky by putting it down on the paper and letting the pigment run. I'm using a mix of these purples and blues, and I'm letting them run into each other and create this moody, heavy sky, the kind of skies where you just know there's going to be a fall of snow. So pick up with a really light hand some of those deeper dark colours, and don't be scared of putting a bit of pigment on the page. That's absolutely fine, and I'll explain why a little later. So I'm having a little bit of fun here playing with those purples, and I want to introduce just a tiny bit of warmth on the horizon, just the smallest speck and subtle element of orange. And it's that you see sometimes when you just look up and look far away into the horizon when you know that it's going to snow. You just see that warmth of the sun settling in the distance. So really just allow yourself to have a bit of a play, let the colours run, and imagine that snow scene. And while that paint is really wet, and I do mean really wet, I'm just turning my paintbrush round, picking up some water blobs and letting those dot onto the sky. And as you can see, it disperses the pigment in the paint, which is why we wanted to put a fair amount on, and spreads it out. Time to dry this off, and for a little bit of extra interest in that sky, I'm pointing the nozzle from right to left and pushing some of that spare water along the page, and that movement just leaves a little bit more interest, a little bit more sense of foreboding and impending snow. I'm adding a few final water dots here, and these will show more clearly. Just a really easy and fun technique before we move on to the foreground. And in the same way, I just begin by wetting the paper. Inspiration today has come from Never Hopeless by Elizabeth and Marimi Small Art, and I've been watching both of their channels and being really inspired to pick up my paintbrush and have a play with colour in my art journal, my junk journal and my traveller's notebook. I'll leave a link to their channels in the description box down below, where there's also links to the various supplies that I'm using today. And these are my Arteza 36 pound palette of watercolours, which seem to give me plenty of choice for colours for lots of different pages and techniques. And for the foreground now, what I'm doing is pulling on some of those more grey shades of blue to try to represent snow in the foreground, albeit smattered still with some of those purples from the sky. And it's time to move on to putting down a trunk, using my very fine nib here for that tree that's in the foreground. And I begin by boldly making a mark and then working from top to bottom to represent those branches and leaves. And the technique that I'm using today is all about dotting and dabbing. So picture the branch of one of those fir trees and take the paintbrush loaded with some beautiful green, dot it onto the paper and create a single branch. And gradually I'm working down the trunk, and I'm happily taking different shades of green because I think that's what's really out there in nature, perhaps going a little bit darker as I move lower down, remembering to fill in at the skirt of the tree and take those branches all the way down to the snow. So it's just a few minutes of happy time, definitely relaxing, before we move on to using the same technique to create the trees in the background. And the only difference really here is that we're going to create smaller trees, and we're going to use slightly darker and paler shades of colour. So I've got that more prominent, vibrant, colourful green in the foreground, and I'm just randomly creating trees, some that feel more distant by being even paler, as you can see there, positioning them between a couple of others, just nudging behind those in the nearer sight. It's time to add some layers of heavy snow to the trees to have it laden on the branches, and for this I'm improvising a little bit. I'm using silver from my set of gouache paints from Arteza, and I'm going to try using my chalk pen, my white chalk pen, and I'll use both of these to add an interesting effect before we play with the glitter. So I'm first picking up the paint and I'm adding it to the branches, thinking about seeing clumps of snow, so again using dots with the brush, working down the branches really easy, and just adding that to both the foreground and then the background trees. And then I'm moving on to adding some more crisp white, so I'm picking up small amounts of that white chalk pen and just dotting it again, working down each of those lovely green branches, foreground and background. And I feel like it's at this moment that it starts to really feel dark, wintry, snowy. It's the combination of green and then those white and silver dots that start to bring it to life. And for a little bit of indulgence and a little bit of play, I'm adding some glue and some glitter just to make it extra sparkly. Do you play with glitter in your craft? Do you have glitter in your craft collection? I would love to know what you do. I've recently acquired a beautiful selection of stunning, sparkly and holographic glitters, and I'm thinking through some ideas of how I might like to play with them. So if you have some thoughts, please do drop a comment down below. Give me some of your tips and ideas for how you play with glitter. And as I'm sprinkling that silver glitter on the picture, I am trying to be quite light-handed, so I'm just using a few tiny specks and then I'm knocking off the excess. And as you do this, just to be really economical, you can always collect the excess glitter and put it back in the pot. Time to add just a little bit more shading to add a sense of presence and significance to that tree in the foreground. So I'm picking up some of those darker shades of blue, the grey tones again, the shades that you think might represent undulations in the snow, and I'm adding that to the base of the big tree, light-handedly touching the page, giving a sense of folds of snow and shadows under the branches. The paints that I've used today are listed in the description box down below, and I've also got a discount code if you fancy treating yourself and having a little bit of watercolour wintry fun. And here I'm using the same shades in the palette just to add a bit of a wash. There's the page I did a couple of weeks ago for November using the same paints, and I'm ready to stick the picture in and write some notes on the page. It's at this time each year, just once a year, that I like to take a moment to reflect, to think about all the good things that have happened and that we've done perhaps in our journaling, art and junk journaling, and to just think about what I'd like to do that will be a bit different, a bit exciting perhaps, in 2020. So the journaling that I'll be doing and the ideas that I'm sharing today are just my top 3 thoughts for things that will move me forwards, and I do wonder whether you have some ideas for 2020. Is there one activity that you can imagine yourself doing or would like to do that would just make you really happy? What is it you've always wanted to do but perhaps have never dared? For me, this was definitely using colour in this way in 2019, and I've just got really excited about using my paints and my watercolour pencils, so I feel like I've been able to allow myself to have a play, allow myself to fail, and definitely doing that publicly here on YouTube, but learning in the process and having fun, and isn't that what this is all about? So now I'm just setting up 3 boxes so I can share my 3 ideas for 2020, and I've picked pencils in shades that complement the picture on the left, just going around a piece of paper that I've stuck down on the page to give the box a bit more definition, a bit of a crisper edge, even once we've blended those colours using a water brush. I think I need a little bit more boldness around that box, so I've just pulled out a darker shade of brown here and I'm working that around that little piece of paper, and it's just stuck down with a piece of washi to hold it in place, and I'm adding the water now to just blend that colour. So I find this a really easy technique and relaxing and fun, and it gives me a space to journal, to add either a title or some extra detail. In January, I'm really excited to be learning some new watercolour techniques. I have a collaboration that I'll be sharing on this channel with a watercolour artist, so definitely subscribe and hit the notification bell if you're interested in having some fresh energy and thoughts and ideas and inspiration to get going in January. I'm also planning to play along with the regular Instagram game of Junk Journal January, which is hosted by Meg Journals here on YouTube. So if you are interested in creating journals and journal spreads and sharing them, or indeed just seeing what others create, then check out Junk Journal January, and I will provide details of that in other videos, and you can also find me on Instagram and find my pages that I'll be sharing as part of that challenge. I do have a playlist with many journal spreads that I've already done, so if you fancy having a browse through that, I'll leave a link in the description box down below. I've added a couple of borders to the 2 pages to really bring it together and to give it some definition. You can see me colouring in the second. It's a sort of ribbon effect with little doodles, and you can see a large dash around the picture on the left, and now I'm ready to write my ideas in the boxes. Top of my list for 2020, and something I've been thinking about for quite some time, is to bring sewing into the activities that I do. So I've spent a lot of time using faux stitching like this on tags and on journal spreads, and I guess I've been quite creative in adding it in different ways, in different styles, just to make it a little bit more interesting. I can't sew, I don't know how to use a sewing machine, but I've plunged and I bought one, and I'm going to learn in 2020, and you guys have really kindly offered to help me. I reached out on Facebook and you helped me get the courage to go and choose one and buy one, and I'm really excited, and this is what I'm journaling about, to go on that journey and introduce real stitching into the things that I make into my junk journals. So I'm going to add stitching to snippet rolls and to pockets and to envelopes, and if it's paper I'm going to sew on it. So my first plan for 2020 that I want to share with you today is all about sewing, and this is the little machine that I bought. It was £40 from Hobbycraft, which is a shop here in the UK. I suspect many of you have bigger and more complicated machines, but I'm going to begin and make life easy for myself at the beginning of 2020. My second point for 2020 is to do more of something I love, something that I think I've done in 2019, and that's bring the outside into our journaling, into the colours and onto the paper. So number 2 is all about loving the seasons, making the very best of what's around us wherever you live, and bringing that into the stories that we tell on a page. This is one that I told about the changing leaves, the colours of autumn, and I really enjoyed putting that one together. The poppies on the left, rather abstract, were different shades for a September spread. And this is one I did a while ago in more summery colours. You can see the purple hues and maybe some of the warmth in the tones and the paint and this card. So what I want to do in 2020 is bring more of the seasons onto the page. Maybe a bit like this, using the yellows of spring, the daffodil that we painted, continuing doodling and using collage, writing on the page. So my idea for 2020 is to stop every now and again, walk outside, see what's around me, and you might live where it's built up and urban, or you might have countryside around you, whatever that is, but taking a moment to really appreciate those colours and sometimes even the sounds, and then bring that magic into your style of journaling, into your junk journal, whether it's the papers you choose when you put a journal together or the spread that you create when you put it down on the page. Really just using each month in the very best way we can. And my third personal promise for 2020 is to continue a learning journey around painting, and I mentioned a collaboration that I'll be doing in January to learn a few more techniques. I've played around with some ideas in 2019. I've made life easy by stamping and painting with watercolour, as I did in this autumnal spread. I had a go at using some real brush pens and learnt that there are things that I can do, that you can do, that we can do together. Many of you shared some of these pictures that you've had a go at on Facebook and Instagram. So I'd like to continue learning and having the confidence to have a splatter. And a channel that I'll be watching to help me with new ideas in 2020 is Creation CC. So CC is a phenomenal artist here on YouTube. Do you know her? Do you watch her? Do you bring her ideas into your art and junk journaling? I'm just really relishing the thought of bringing new techniques, having a go, and I'm journaling here about exploring new ways of painting and using colour and techniques, of inspiring and being inspired, and of creating and seeing others' creations. Who are you inspired by here on YouTube, and who do you think you'll be watching in 2020 to give you some fantastic ideas and confidence to play? I'm adding a bit of colour just to bring the spread together. I've chosen a little bit of purple washi here. You can see again that balances with the tones on the left. I like to use washi, it's just a really easy way of adding a little bit of finish. And to bring out some of that ribbon black border, I'm adding this washi in a piano style, and to complement the snow, the heavy sky and the glitter on the left, I'm just using a few little white sequins. So I've chosen 5 dots of glue on the right hand side, and I'm picking those up and adding them to the page. And in the month of December I'll be adding this video to a playlist. So that will be a playlist of similar videos if anyone's interested in creating one in the month of December about your junk art journal plans for 2020. My invitation is create your video, let me know, send me a link, and I can share it in a playlist, and hopefully we'll all be inspired to have a fantastic 2020, to go on our creative journeys, our personal creative journeys that are all very different, but hopefully lots of fun, relaxing and very rewarding. So here's 3 journaling ideas for 2020. I'm going to launch my sewing, embrace the seasons and develop my painting techniques. And if you'd like to do some more of this with me, then hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell, and we can have fun, play, relax and learn in 2020.